Hi, hello, welcome back. My name is Cooper. I've been a painter for 15 years now, and I'm working towards my MFA at Stanford. And today, I'd like to talk to you about 3 things that every new artist needs to do in order to have a successful art practice. So, let's get into it. Okay. Thing number 1. Every artist needs to be a reader. Now, you may think, Cooper, I've heard you talk about this before. Well, you should read, you should be doing research. Yes. You know why? Because it's freaking important. You ever have a teacher in a class and a test is coming up and they underline something on the board or they bring it up multiple times? That's because it's important. If they just mention it one time as a throwaway thing, it's not going to stick to your brain. But the more something's repeated, the more important it is. So when I say that it's important to always be taking in new information, to be reading, to be listening to things, to be watching movies that are relevant to the things you're trying to be doing, to be going to libraries, museums, to be doing research, I say that because it's important and it can do a lot in terms of where you're going to draw inspiration from for the projects that you work on. So it's always important to be feeding your brain stuff. Anything you put in your body, anything you consume visually or experientially becomes fuel or nourishment for your mind and your body. So keep that in mind. I mean, I've also heard this term brain rot, where people are on social media constantly and they're looking at a lot of fast food content and they come away from it feeling quite drained. So it's not to say that you should just be always stimulating your brain with something. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you always need to be watering the garden. Not always, because then you overwater the garden. You need to water the garden daily with things that are good for the plants. So think about the things that are good for your art practice. That is other artworks that have already been created and sources of culture in a more general sense. And stay away from the brain rot. That's thing number 1. Thing number 2 is when you find something amazing that you want to capture for later and use for your art practice, you need to have a way to store it. You need to have a place to put it so you can reference it later, so you can find it. It's not really helpful or useful to you to grab a bunch of stuff if you can't find it again later. That's why having at least a base level of organization or some sort of personal archive or library is really important for your practice. So you need to be always looking around for stuff, keeping an eye open and for interesting things to add to your work. And then when you find it, you need to A, grab it, and then B, have a place to store it and store it in such a way that you can find it again. So that kind of organization really does matter for your artwork. And the third thing every artist needs to do is to be making art every day. Now, I've talked about this before too, but I sincerely believe the best thing you can be doing for your practice is to prime the pump. And another way to say that is to keep the juices flowing or warm up. You know, the best way to exert yourself is to warm up, is to get the body warmed up. And exercise, that's a thing. But very much in art, that's a thing too. If you want to come into the studio one day and you have something due tomorrow, or you're coming to the studio hoping to just bang out a great work, it's going to be actually pretty hard if you haven't built up any momentum, if the creative juices aren't already flowing, if you haven't been keeping your mind flexible and limber by keeping it stimulated with daily practice. Daily practice is how great art is made. You make lots of stuff, you work on stuff every day, and maybe 3 out of the 10 things you make in the last 10 days are useful. But then you have 3 things, whereas someone else who comes in once a week has 1 thing, and maybe it's good. So to review. So to review, it's really important and beneficial to you as an artist to be always taking notes, always be looking out for stuff and feeding it to your brain, and having a way to store that stuff when you find it and so that you can use it again. And then of course it's also important to use that stuff now that you found it and inform your projects and work on your projects daily. It's not that you need to focus on making the best thing you can. You just need to be consistent. If you are consistent in making work that you care about, or at least practicing with like a 5-minute drawing every day, the valuable artwork will come, just so long as you're willing to be consistent and put the time and the love into that thing. So that's what I have to offer you this week. I hope that's useful to you, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.